the best, is also a Renaissance woman. So she got her bachelor's degree in physics. Okay, great. Then she went on to get a master's degree in history, different, and then she got her PhD in ethnic studies and philosophy. True Renaissance woman. Then she was awarded a postdoctoral fellowship at UCLA. Sorry, I'm a Trojan. Fighting on.
UCLA?
Yay! I'm just going to keep fighting on up here. She was over at UCLA in the Center for the Study of Women. And then she went on to teach for 10 years cross-cultural philosophy, as well as women's studies. And she was a philosophy professor there, had her tenure. Anyway, she's here tonight to grace us with some of her really beautiful poetry. But I have a couple of questions for you this evening. So, you are known for talking about feminist theory, but also just your social justice initiatives within your poetry and sharing that. So I wanted to know from you, what inspired that passion?
It started when I was really young, and I'm not sure when it began, but according to my father, who tells stories about my childhood, I was obsessed with fairness as a very young child, and not in the way that a lot of kids are, like I didn't get as big of a popsicle as my brother or whatever. But I was really concerned with people being homeless, with people being hungry, with there being war in the world. And I, very young, I just was really upset about these things. And I didn't understand why people were so obsessed with these perceived differences, and why people were so, I mean, I'm a mixed race kid, and so I grew up with family members that looked like everybody in this audience, and I just didn't understand why people couldn't get along, and why they thought it was so important what religion you were, what race you were, what gender you were. And I just, from a very young age, thought this was just a real problem.
Great. So I had the chance to learn a little bit about Jennifer Lisa in preparing just to interview you today, and I saw a post on your blog related to, as I mentioned, she studied physics in her undergrad, but then made this transition and now is pursuing this dream to travel around the world and share her poetry and her spoken word. So I wanted to hear a little bit about this journey that you've gone through as transitioning from being in this really practical place, and you specifically used the words to pursue, well, the rational process, which is where you were as a tenured faculty member, to pursue this huge foolish projects, is what you called them in your blog. So I wanted to hear a little bit about what that transition has been like.
Okay. Yeah, I call what I'm doing now my impossible tour, because the first poem I'm going to read tonight, the main refrain, is having to do with doing the impossible. And a number of people think that what I'm doing is, ridiculous, a huge foolish project, kind of giving up a tenure professorship and traveling about like a troubadour doing poetry and, But I'm trying to change the world, and I think there's so many ways to do that. And I did go through a lot of different studies, because I've just always loved to study everything. I think for me, the fundamental questions were always the same. Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? What did you come to do? And you can approach those questions through philosophy, through physics, through history, and through poetry. So my huge foolish project now is to combine the emotional with the rational. When I do lectures at universities, and when I used to just do lectures, I was really trying to reach people through the rational, using logic and making arguments. And with my poetry, I try to reach people through the emotional. And what I realized is I really want to reach people both ways, and so I do both now. I combine the two. I make arguments, but I also make art. Because I think that in order to touch people's heart, you have to create something beautiful. And I think that art is better at transforming people than simple arguments. So I decided to embark on this adventure and see where it leads.
That's great. And I would imagine, I know we spoke a bit before as well, that a lot of your work influences people for change. And I was hoping you could share with us the time when you've seen that happen.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I guess I feel like I see it all the time. I definitely saw it with my students. So in the course of 16 weeks, I would see a transformation. I actually had a lot of hostile students in my class. I taught in the South, and a number of students just didn't like the idea of me as a professor. And so I had to overcome that hostility. And I saw this transformation of these young people from, hostility, bitterness, apathy, to becoming real change agents. A lot of my students have gone on to become activists or to become involved in different movements or careers where they're helping people. And I've seen them, become aware of what their role is in the world. I've also seen it in my audiences. I've seen people listen to certain poems and then come up to me afterwards and say that the poem really was their poem, that it spoke for them, that it was their story, and that hearing their own story being performed as a poem by somebody else was transformative for them.
That's great, and I wanted to share a quote that I work at a university, and we always tell students, do not look at ratemyprofessor.com because it's always extreme, or it's just skewed. But I went on ratemyprofessor.com today and I checked out Dr. Best here, and I found this really beautiful quote from one of her students. So I wanted to share it because I think that it displays what she was just expressing in the way that this poetry and what she does transforms people. So one of her students said, "When I first saw the syllabus, I planned on dropping. Thank God I didn't. I have never been so motivated to succeed in my life. By the end of the semester, our class was extremely close, and we all felt that Dr. Best had changed our lives. If you have the chance to take her class, please do, and get ready to become a better human being." So I just love that. I felt like it was very well recommended. So we're going to get the opportunity in a couple of minutes here to see what you do and hear from you. But I wanted to know...
That'd be too much of a build-up.
How else can we find your work, and how can we find more?
I have a website, jenniferlisabest.com, and I'm all over the web. You can friend me on Facebook, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm on SoundCloud and Reverb Nation, YouTube. I've got a bunch of my poetry online that you can just watch or listen to, and then I also sell it as MP3s and as actual hard CDs that you can buy.
Great. All right. Well, are you
And I
ready
have
to share?
cards. She has cards.
Cards.
Old school.
You get a business card, you get a business card. It's good. Speaking of which, business cards. There's business cards everywhere tonight. Great. Well, anything else you want to share with us tonight before?
Well, that's good.
Okay, good. All right. Without further ado,